The best tournament in League of Legends is about to begin. The summer 2022 LPL playoff bracket has been decided, and it's going to be an absolute banger of a playoffs. All the teams that you could want to get in here, besides maybe TT, ended up in the playoff bracket. And the matchups are perfect. We literally got the perfect bracket. And the way we're going to go about this rundown is to section off the teams into 3 different sections. We have the gods, top esports, JDG, V5, and RNG, the demigods in EDG and Weibo, and then the mortals of LNG, OMG, FPX, and BLG. So we're going to jump into the playoff matchups, and we're going to tell you why these matchups matter, a little bit about the teams, the strengths and weaknesses, and try to go through a comprehensive rundown so that you can enjoy the LPL as much as I do, because going forward, I think this is one of the best LPL brackets we've ever had. This might be the best LPL playoff bracket ever in the history of LPL. The amount of teams, the amount of storylines, and what we're about to witness. So it's going to be 12 best of 5. So let's start with the mortals. You have the mortals of LNG, OMG, FPX, and BLG. Now, OMG versus FPX, I've titled here the matchup of the underdogs. For people that have been watching my stream, they know that I am a huge OMG fan. They are my favorite team to watch right now in the LPL. And the reason is because they are so unique. The way that they play is different than almost every single team. And even just the way they draft is different than every single team. They're a team that doesn't have the ability to go head to head with top teams if they play tank top, mage mid, and they just try to just go pound for pound with the top teams in LPL. They're never going to win like that. So what they've decided to do is come up with a roster of picks that they have that are unique, and they have enough of them now that you can't ban them out. You're going to have to play against one of these weird OMG comps, and if you haven't been playing against them specifically, it's very hard to know exactly how your team's going to interact. So OMG, the dark horse for me in this tournament, they have 7 pocket picks that they play frequently. Shen top for Shanji, Shyvana, and Rumble. So they play 3 unique top laners outside of just playing normal stuff. I mean, they can still play Gwen. It's not like they cannot play standard. They also like to play Sejuani if they have to go a tank top. But all these picks you have to always be worried about when you play against OMG. Then for mid lane, they also have Akali and Sylas. So Sylas is pretty common. People play it a lot. But Cream is one of the best Akali players in the world. So the interesting part is that you're in a dynamic where you don't want to take away Sylas from them and play it yourself because you know that it's giving their Akali. But do you want to waste a ban on Akali or Sylas, or do you want to ban both? Because if you end up banning only Akali, they'll just first pick Sylas, and they play both sides of that extremely well. So interesting situation with Cream having to deal with him in the ban phase mid lane. Then bot lane, you have Samira, which is one of Abel's best champions, probably his best champion overall, and he is willing to play it into anything. They ended up taking a game versus Top, who is the #1 seed going into this playoff bracket in LPL, and they won a game where they were playing Samira Nautilus into what people think is the most unplayable Samira lane, Renata Aphelios. You would think that they would just never be able to engage. Samira having to run into Renata seems impossible. He's got to know that that's worded too. Guys, I'm playing. It looked so uninspiring too. The way he just like waddled in to flank it, like, you know, they're still fighting. I mean, they have to fight. It's Soul, but this game's over. Oh, Abel! The Abel Samira! Oh my god, the Abel Samira, and they got Drake. Cold got Drake. Oh my god, the Abel Samira popped off, bro. Holy. Bro, he found the angle finally. But after they won that game, they've just got a ton of respect Samira bans. Normally, Samira is 1, 2, 3 banned against them. It didn't happen in the last series, but this is something that I assume that they'll be able to play in playoffs. If you give them a good Samira angle, they'll play it every time. And they might play it even if you don't give them a good Samira angle. So you always have to worry about Samira. And then the last counter pick they have is Ashe. So Ashe support into Renata. They play Ashe support. They had a really good series with it recently into V5, and they just know how to play that side of the matchup. So all of these meta picks that people are constantly picking. So you have like tank top laners where Shanji can play Shen, Shyvana, and Rumble. Okay, those are all playable matchups. Then you have the mid lane dynamic, which we discussed with Cream, and then you have the bot lane dynamic where you have to always be worried about early picking Renata, which is an extremely strong pick because of the Ashe. And then Samira is something that they'll play into seemingly anything. Other thing that's really insane about this team is that Shanji, who a lot of people don't know, he was a rookie this year, is the solo kill leader of the LPL. He got the most solo kills out of anyone, and a lot of that comes down to his matchups. He just plays things that other people don't, so he knows when he can solo kill and when he can't, and other people just don't have the same ability to read those matchups because they don't play into them frequently. Now, versus OMG, you have FPX. For people that don't know, C9 Summit from spring now is FPX Summit in summer. This team started off horrible. They started off 0-5. A lot of that had to do with their strength of schedule, but also they did not have Summit playing yet. And as soon as Summit started playing, not only did Summit play well in the team, Clid started playing a lot better. There's some synergy. Maybe it's the Korean synergy. Maybe having somebody else on the team that was Korean helped Clid feel more comfortable within the team. But Clid started playing better instantly when Summit joined. Summit is essentially the same player where you always have to be worried about his Gnar. I would expect a lot of Gnar bans in this series versus OMG. But he also has other picks that he seems more practiced on. It's not the same Summit that we saw in spring where it's like, oh, just ban his Jason Gnar and he's just useless. I mean, he has a decent Gwen, which he had in spring, but Gwen is in a good spot. He's got a decent Gwen, and then also Kennen coming into the meta is something that I think is going to be hard for OMG to deal with in this series. So you have this underdog matchup. There's a lot of dynamics, a lot of pocket picks. I think this is going to be a banger. It's going to be right off the bat. As soon as we get into LPL, which hopefully when this video ends up going live, it will be already announced. If not, I guess I can say it here. The LPL playoffs will start on the 16th of August. So we're getting a 1-day break and then we are right into playoffs, and it is every single day. There's 12 best of 5s and I think 8 or 9 games are in a row. And then you have the, round 4 loser bracket and all that stuff. Next matchup, LNG versus BLG. I've titled this matchup the Super Frauds because both of these are fallen super teams. Both of these teams were supposed to be top 4, top 5 in LPL. They were supposed to be the gods of LPL when the teams were formed. But LNG recently, they've just looked like they have Superman on their team, which is DoNB 2021 Summer Split MVP, after being exposed to Kryptonite. It's DoNB being exposed to Kryptonite, and he just doesn't have the power anymore. He has good games every now and then, but he's just weird now. DoNB just doesn't seem like the same player. He used to be able to play all these random melee champions in a bunch of matchups, and now the melee champions that he pulls out are like Gragas. He had a weird Gragas obsession earlier on in the split where he was just playing Gragas mid and they were just losing every game. Recently, I will say this team has looked better, but it feels like almost every player outside of Light individually has been underperforming. They have Lu Mao and Iwandi going back and forth. They don't really have a support that they've decided on fully. We saw Lu Mao in one series, Iwandi in the next, and both of them don't look like they're playing close to their levels. Ale is just not a carry anymore. I know he played an Olaf game recently that people are going to be hyped on versus Weibo, but he just doesn't look like he has the ability to win a lot of the lanes that you thought he would be able to win. So when you think of Ale, he was kind of like Bin Light before, where it was like, oh, you're going to see Fiora, Jax, Camille, like that was his repertoire. But now you look at his champions and it's like Sejuani, I guess, is something that he needs to be put on. Gnar, he's just kind of weak side and he's just there. Doesn't really win his lanes, even if they are 1v1s. If you strong side him, he's not really reliable. And that is why during the season they had been subbing him out. They were playing with Panda C. Panda C had poor performances, and because of those poor performances, Ale is back. Tarzan, the jungler, he's had some really good games, but he's had really bad games too. He's extremely hit or miss, but I do think that the meta is favorable for Tarzan this playoff. So you have Trundle, which Tarzan is good at. Poppy, it seems really solid at that. He was able to pull out the Skarner into the Poppy. So it feels like this will actually be a benefit. The meta will be a benefit if it stands as it is right now for LNG in playoffs. Okay, now on the other side, you have BLG, which is maybe even a bigger example of a super team being built because you had people coming in from all over. Just go back to spring. When BLG started this year of LPL, their roster was Breathe, Weiwei, Fofo, Uzi, Doggo, and Crisp. And there was a point not so long ago, a few weeks ago, where when you watched BLG games, the starting roster you saw was Bin, Can, Icon, Rise, and Crisp. It's a completely different team. So now BLG has finally settled on a roster where Bin is playing top. Obviously, there was the trade with RNG. Bin is playing top, and now we see Weiwei in the jungle. It seems like Icon has become the starting mid laner. There's not really an Icon Fofo dynamic. Doggo and Crisp. So they have a roster that has been looking good. The problem with this roster is that they don't have great synergy together. As I said, they were playing musical chairs. There was different players in all the time. So because of that, it doesn't feel like the team has that much synergy, but the players are all good in their own right. So Bin is still one of the best top laners in LPL for my money. He plays all the carries super well. His Jax is terrifying. If you give him a good Camille angle, he can always do that. Fiora, all that stuff. Bin is still a great player, and he's not getting much help. He's playing pretty much 1v1, but this guy is super solid, amazing on carries. When you look at Weiwei, his Xin is really good. That's, I think, a pick that might be banned from him frequently in this series. But the problem with this team right now is that all of the lanes can win, but when they group up for team fights, they're almost like the reverse RNG, where they can win early, but they get into a team fight, you can just tell that they don't have experience playing with each other. They don't know like how each of the other members wants to play the team fight out, so they look really disjointed. I would say that LNG is a slight favorite for me in this series, but I do think that this is going to be a banger. I mean, you love the narrative because one of the super teams is going to fail. One of these super teams is going to lose in the first round of summer playoffs, and depending on how other teams do, that could be end of their season right now. I think BLG, it's almost impossible for them to have enough championship points to make the regional qualifier if they do lose the series. But maybe if some other teams, you know, lose out early, maybe it might be possible. LNG, they ended up finishing in round 3 of spring, so they have a little bit more championship points. But because of how summer championship points are weighted, the loser here is probably just done for the year. Now we've got the Demigods. Now, the reason why these teams are demigods is because they're almost the gods. On good days, you feel like these teams could win, EDG and Weibo, but on bad days, they just look like they're in a different tier, that the other teams are just a tier above them. So you have EDG, which is last year's world champions. They have finally committed to a roster change. So up until like halfway through summer, they were playing with the same roster they won Worlds with, and they were struggling. They struggled in spring split playoffs, and they had been struggling in summer. They just looked like they didn't have that top level anymore. They have now settled on a roster change. Junjia is the starting jungler over JJ, and the team has looked much better since the change. Junjia is just much more active early game. It feels like they're starting to get back to that EDG identity that they used to have, where they played bot side. They were able to, you know, get a push bot side, they would dive bot lane, and they would just be extremely stable, get Viper huge, and then Viper would carry the game. Mako has had a rough year, but since Junjia joined, he has looked better. He's not great. He still sometimes ins. He has those moments where you're like, Mako, man, like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be one of the best in the region. Get it together. You still have those moments, but in general, he has been playing at a higher level, and EDG has had a decent run. Outside of their throw to RNG, which, I mean, they threw a 10k gold lead versus RNG in game 3. You Stormrazor? I mean, I assume that he doesn't have the... Oh my god, they stole it! They stole it. No, Junjia. No. Oh my lord. No shot.
So much. Scout needs a great little ult here as Jun just misses. Goes down the...
I mean, can they win the fight anyway? They're playing into Elder and Baron, but they might be able to win the fight because they just got onto Gala. If they kill Gala, it's over. Wait, RNG win.
Once again, Gala will not be dying today.
No, they actually win the game. No, they actually lost. It's actually over. This is a legendary throw. This is a legendary throw. Outside of that loss, the only other loss they had was to Top Esports, where they went 1-2. So they've actually been able to battle with the top teams. And I think that if they continue the form that they've had, they've 2-0'd 4 series in a row now. If they continue that form, we are going to have an absolute banger of a series. I think that they are better than OMG and FPX. They should be able to beat whoever comes out of OMG and FPX. But versus RNG, that could be an absolute just barn burner. I don't know the word to say, but that could be a great series. That could be a phenomenal series. On the other side of the bracket, we have Weibo, which are the coin flippers. But surprisingly, the Shy, who's known as the ultimate coin flipper, is not the biggest coin flipper on this team. I would say the Shy right now is either one of the best top laners in the league when he plays well, or he's like a middle of the pack. He's like a mediocre top laner. But the biggest coin flipper on this team is On. On is either the best support by far, where you're like, oh my god, this guy is just cracked out of his mind. He'll be playing Pyke, he'll be playing all these matchups, find crazy engages, or he's actually just the worst support you've ever seen in your life. He is just running it down. It looks like he is griefing the game intentionally. So this team has a really high and a really low. It just depends on what happens on that day. It just depends on what side of the bed they wake up on. Either they're going to be great or they're going to be terrible. The other player that I wanted to mention on this team is SOFM. I think Quanfang and Angel are solid. They do everything that you'd want out of a mid and an AD carry. But SOFM is weird. He's just a weird jungler right now. He's a tendency to overfarm. A lot of the times he'll have these games where he looks invisible, which is not very common in the LPL for a jungler to actually just look invisible. So he has a lot of these invisible games where he's overfarming. He's not really pressuring any lane. He's not countering any ganks, and you know, they just lose out slowly. And I think that could be a big issue for Weibo going forward. Other teams seem really active. They have a lot more set plays that they go to throughout the game, and Weibo looks like they're just always playing it by ear. The other narrative that is interesting to hit is that if they meet BLG, so if BLG end up beating LNG, which I wouldn't say that they're favorite to, but if that ends up happening, then you have Bin versus old team. Weibo was previously Suning. Outside of Sword Art, it is the same team that went to World. So Bin played with 3 of those guys, went to World Finals, and performed pretty well there. I mean, Bin is the only person to get a pentakill in World Finals. So now we have the gods, the top tier teams in the LPL. So we've got RNG, V5, JDG, and Top Esports. So the reason why I waited to record this video is because we had to see up until the last day where RNG finished. If RNG 2-0'd LGD, they would have got 2nd place. If they 2-1'd LGD, they would have got 3rd. And if they lost LGD, they would get 4th. And here we see it. They ended up losing to LGD on the last day. They lost to the Nila Pike lane, and they ended up 4th place. MSI and LPL Spring Champs are coming in as 4th seed. And the interesting thing about them getting 4th seed here is that in summer of last year, they were in the same spot where they won MSI, they won Spring, and they were in this round 3, and LNG came from round 1, was on a hot streak, and ended up taking them out. So they probably have bad memories of losing this round 3. And the reason why round 3 is super scary for these teams, for V5 and RNG here, is because if you lose, you do not get double elimination. As soon as you get to round 4, you have double elimination. In round 3, you don't. So you lose the best of 5, you're out. So RNG versus EDG might play a best of 5 that will determine their seeding in Worlds completely. It could be the difference between a 1 and a 3 seed, or even a 1 and a 4 seed, by just losing one best of 5 here. RNG recently, to talk about them more specifically as a team, they've had bad early games. They don't have a good idea on what to do with their champions in the early game, but they're amazing in team fights. Like when they get into a team fight 2-3k gold down, you almost always feel like they can win. I mean, Gala is a super good hyper carry. He's really reliable, and it seems like Yahoo just knows what he needs to do as a mid laner in a fight to win them a fight. So they look really good in team fights. They look really good around objectives. They look terrible early game. Now, the interesting thing about that is because they looked like this when they ended up winning Spring, earlier this year, when they ended up winning Spring. So going into MSI, part of the reason why people thought that RNG was going to lose to T1 is because T1 had really good early games and RNG had terrible early games, and people thought that T1 would get so far ahead over RNG that RNG would not be able to compete anymore. They're just too far behind. If you're down 10k gold every game, it's not a recipe for success. RNG was able to fix that problem. They've been able to figure out ways to make their early games more streamlined where they don't get disadvantages, and then they're able to use their strengths of good early team fighting, mid game team fighting, good late game team fighting, just to their advantage. If they get around a dragon at like 15 minutes and they're even in gold, I expect them to win every single time. And when they played against T1, they actually had good early games. So if this team gets early game leads, I expect them to be able to beat some of the best teams in the region. I think if they fix their early game, they're probably the favorites to just win the whole thing. On to the other side of the bracket, we have V5. The V5 is a solid team. They have some of the best early game macro. Like when they get a lead, it seems like everything just operates like clockwork. They know where to ward, they know what buffs to invade, how to just run a game from minute 1 to minute 30 and win the game. The problem with them is when the plan doesn't go right, V5 can look really bad at times. The other issue that I think V5 has is Rich. I think Rich is just the weakest top laner that is like going to be left in this section. If you're looking at the top 4 and you have Breathe, Wayward, and 369, he's probably the worst out of those by far. If you then add in that the team that they're most likely going to play is Weibo and the Shy in this round 3, that could be an issue. They ended up losing to Weibo earlier this year, and I think that is something that could be a huge problem. If the Shy has one of his pop-off series, I expect that Rich is going to have a problem with that. Another thing to note is that they have subbed in XLB, seems like permanently, for Karsa. So XLB is now their jungler. He has different strengths. He's really good early game. He's not as good in team fights as Karsa. Karsa was just an insane team fight player. He just has such a wealth of experience that he's able to draw from in these team fights. And I think that the meta would actually suit him pretty well right now. In previous years, Karsa was just the Trundle guy. He was playing Trundle when Trundle was out of meta. So now with Trundle being in the meta, and you have, Poppy, you have Xin, you have Vi, you would think that this would actually be a good Karsa meta. So we'll see, maybe he does get some games, but up until now, since they started subbing in XLB, it seems like Xiaolong Bao is just the jungler that is going to be playing. V5, I mean, you don't really need to talk about Rookie and Photic. These are top tier carries. It's mainly about, are they going to be in a position to actually carry the game? And yeah, I don't think that this side of the bracket is super good for V5. I think they would have actually preferred to be on the lower side of the bracket because Rookie is a really good dynamic with Knight. If they played Knight in round 4, I could see that. If they play top in round 4, I think Rookie versus Knight, he has like insane win rate all the time, and it just seems like Rookie is the counter to that guy. That could have been interesting, but on this side of the bracket, they have to really worry about their first round opponent, because if they lose, they have to qualify through regional gauntlet. Now we move on to the second seed team, which is JDG. Now, when I see this team, I think that they are the team that is better than the sum of their parts. They have a really strong team identity, almost like a really cracked out version of Misfits, like a really good version of Misfits for my LEC watchers, where they just know what they want to do every single game. 369 is like the perfect weak sider, like Sejuani, Gnar, Orin, GP, whatever. Like this guy will play weak side almost every game, but he is not the same 369 as before. He's not the guy that's going to coin flip the game. His Groggs is also really good too. He's not going to be the guy that's going to coin flip the game. He will lose gracefully if he's getting pressured, and he will do well. He'll even win his lane weak side a lot of the time. So I think that like in this meta, with a Sejuani coming in, with Gwen being really strong, I think 369 is one of the best top laners. I would have him all pro first team after this regular season. Kanavi is the best carry jungler in the league. This might hurt them because there's not many carry junglers that are in the meta right now. Like, your carry junglers are not real carries. It's like Vi and Xin Zhao and things like that. So maybe he'll be able to find counters to them. If we end up in a meta where things change and they're playing different champions, maybe he ends up doing super well on, you know, some of the more carry oriented junglers. He's fine on everything else. He's still good on everything else. But if he's able to play carries, I think he's super solid. Yagao is the playmaker. And I think that he will get, unlike Kanavi, who I think is getting hurt by the meta, I think Yagao is getting helped by the meta, because right now we're seeing LeBlanc come back in. And two of the champions that Yagao was known for in like 2020, for example, he was known as a LeBlanc Zoe 2-trick. Those were the champions that he was going to play constantly. Yeah, recently he has not been able to play them much because they haven't been in the meta, but with LeBlanc coming back, I think that could be really good for JDG. I mean, he plays a good Ahri. He's still able to make plays on other champions, but when he's at his best, he's on these unique playmakers. So we'll have to see what ends up happening there. And then Hope and Missing are just super solid. They can play everything. You know, they can play whatever your team needs. If they need to play Zeri Yuumi, they can play it. If they need to play Sivir Yuumi, they can play it. They have to play Lucian Nami or something more aggressive or be strong side, they can also do that. This team is really scary. They don't have the really high ceiling that other teams have, but they have an extremely high skill floor. They're almost never going to play bad. So you have to just come with a really strong strategy, and you have to play well to beat this team. Definitely deserving of the second seed in LPL right now. Top esports, the superstars. They have a Giga Chad in every lane. They can stomp any lane. Tien has been a top 2 jungler that split with Kanavi. He's been great. You know, we started off memeing like, oh, Tien's like, you know, he's a choker. He's the person that choked worlds for FPX the most in 2021. He had bad performances in both the finals of 2021 that same year for FPX. This year, there's nothing bad you can say about him. Like, he's just good. He is just the fucking GOAT jungler of this league all of a sudden. So, I mean, not all of a sudden. He's been good for years. I mean, he's the finals MVP. You can never take that away from him. This guy is super fucking good. I really hope he keeps playing like this and he's able to redeem himself from that bad Worlds performance, because it looks like it's almost impossible that top esports doesn't end up in Worlds, especially considering their position and their championship points from spring. You have Knight, who's the most mechanically gifted mid laner in the league, best stylist in the world, plays an insane Akali. This guy is insane. Like, when Knight takes over a game, it's almost like no other player in the world. He takes it over in a different way. It's not like he's got insane CS leads. He just kills everyone. He'll just end up with like a Silas game. He'll just drop 14 kills. It'll look like the easiest thing in the world. So Wayward, kind of an egomaniac. You can tell. I mean, this guy is permanently emoting every single time he's walking into the top lane, but he's really solid. Doesn't even feel like a rookie. Feels like a veteran that's been playing for years. He gives me Flandre vibes from when Flandre was smurfing really hard. And then Jackie Love, the psychopath that we all love. He's the guy that will flash forward in the whole game sometimes, but most of the time now he's flashing forward and getting a pentakill. So this guy is cracked out of his mind. I think the champions suit him really well as well. Something to note before we sign off here: Draven, which is a Jackie Love champion. He's probably the best Draven in China. That is back in the meta. So with these Sivir games coming up, I like to see a lot of Jackie Love Draven. I would like to see Jackie Love playing his Draven and putting teams into the dirt. That is going to be the LPL 2022 Summer Playoffs rundown. Hopefully you enjoyed it. You enjoyed the information. I got a notepad here. I tried to get as much information out as possible to take people from not knowing anything about these teams going into LPL to being able to enjoy the tournament as much as I have. I think it's going to be a banger. I hope that you guys are watching with me on the stream and you guys continue to watch the videos, because I'm going to upload every single one of these series. LPL has been so good this split. It's been my favorite split of LPL that I've ever covered. I've been invested in almost every team, almost every match. There's a team that I'm invested in that has been playing. So hopefully you guys have been able to enjoy it as much as I have, and you are ready for the best tournament in esports. I'll see you later.